I installed the hidden camera to catch my husband stealing from me. What it captured instead destroyed everything I thought I knew about my family. The camera sits disguised as an alarm clock on my dresser, its lens no bigger than a pinhole, recording everything that happens in our bedroom. I'd discovered $2,000 missing from the envelope I kept in my closet, emergency cash I'd always maintained from my years of clawing my way up in real estate. Old habits from when I had nothing. When I asked John about it, he looked genuinely confused, even hurt that I'd suspect him. But the money was gone, and we were the only two with access to that room. So I ordered the camera online, set it up while he was at work, and waited to prove what I already believed I knew. I never imagined I'd catch my son tampering with my medication instead. But I'm getting ahead of myself. 3 weeks ago, my life looked perfect from the outside. I'd built Mitchell Development from nothing, turning abandoned properties into luxury addresses across 3 states, commanding respect in boardrooms full of men who'd once dismissed me as a secretary playing at business. At 64, my company's logo on a development site meant prestige, profit, and permanence. I'd won. I'd proven every doubter wrong. My empire was solid, my marriage strong, my children grown and settled. Then Dr. Patterson destroyed that illusion with 6 words: "Your heart rhythm is dangerously irregular." The appointment was supposed to be routine. Annual physical, basic blood work, the checkbox healthcare of a woman too busy to worry about her body. But the EKG showed something wrong, something potentially lethal. My heart's electrical system was misfiring, she explained with clinical precision, creating arrhythmias that could trigger cardiac arrest without warning. The fear that gripped me in that moment was nothing like the calculated risks I'd taken building my business. This was primal terror, my own body betraying me, my mortality suddenly concrete and immediate. She prescribed medication that would regulate everything, keep the dangerous rhythms at bay, let me continue living. 2 pills daily, same time every morning and evening, no exceptions. Your life depends on consistency with this, Dr. Patterson said, her eyes holding mine with an intensity that made the message clear. I left her office with prescriptions clutched in my hand and a new, unfamiliar vulnerability lodged in my chest. John found me that evening staring out our bedroom window at the city skyline I'd helped reshape. He didn't speak, just sat beside me on the bed and took my hand in his. After 20 years of marriage, he understood that sometimes I needed silence more than words. "We'll get through this," he finally said, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "Whatever this is, we handle it together." That night, I let him hold me while I cried, something I hadn't done since my mother's funeral. His steady heartbeat against my cheek reminded me that I wasn't alone in this. Jake's visit 3 days later caught me off guard. My son had been distant lately, absorbed in his own life with Emily, their appearances reduced to obligatory holiday dinners, where conversation felt rehearsed. But suddenly there he was at my door, Emily beside him, both wearing expressions of concern that seemed almost theatrical. "Mom, we heard about your diagnosis," Jake said, stepping inside without waiting for invitation. "We've been so worried about you. Have you thought about updating your will, estate planning? Just to make sure everything's in order." His voice carried a weight that felt wrong, like sympathy performed rather than felt. Emily touched my arm with manufactured warmth. "We just want to help however we can. Maybe we could organize your medications? Make sure you're taking everything correctly?" They asked detailed questions about my prescriptions, my doctor's instructions, my daily routine. They stayed for over an hour, their concern feeling increasingly invasive, their interest in my medication schedule oddly specific. When they finally left, I felt exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with my heart condition. That's when I noticed the money missing from my closet. $2,000. Gone from the envelope I'd hidden behind my winter coats. I'd counted it just 3 days before, old paranoia from my years of poverty, always keeping cash where banks couldn't touch it. Now the envelope sat lighter in my hands, violation settling cold in my stomach. John denied taking it, his confusion seeming genuine, his hurt at my accusation cutting deeper than I expected. But someone had been in our bedroom, in our private space, taking what wasn't theirs. So I bought the camera, installed it carefully, and waited to catch whoever was stealing from me. I expected to see John pocketing cash, maybe Jake or Emily slipping in during a visit, simple theft I could confront and resolve. What the camera captured instead was something I never could have imagined, something that would make me wish stolen money was my only problem. Because 3 days after I installed that camera, I'd watch footage that would shatter every assumption I had about my family, my safety, and whether the people who say they love you might actually be plotting your death. Jake became the son I'd always wanted, attentive, concerned, present, right around the time I started feeling like I was dying. He called every morning at 8:30, his voice warm with worry. "Did you take your medication, Mom? Both pills? You can't forget, not even once." He'd wait on the line while I confirmed, sometimes asking me to describe the pills, their color, their shape. "Just making sure you're taking the right ones," he'd say with a laugh that felt slightly hollow. "You know how pharmacies make mistakes sometimes." Then he'd visit in the afternoons, letting himself in with the key I'd given him years ago, always heading straight to my bedroom to check on things. "How are you feeling today?" he'd ask, sitting on the edge of my bed with practiced concern. "Any dizziness? Heart palpitations? Weakness?" His questions were so specific, so medical, like he'd researched my condition extensively. At first, I found it touching. My distant son suddenly invested in my health. But there was something in his eyes when he asked these questions, a watchfulness that felt less like love and more like waiting. Emily accompanied him on most visits, her manicured hand always resting on his arm, her smile bright and invasive. "Sarah, we really should discuss your estate planning," she'd say, perching on my bedroom chair like she belonged there. "What happens to the business if something happens to you? What about the properties, the investment accounts?" She'd pull out her phone, taking notes as I deflected her questions, her persistence wrapped in false sweetness. "We're just thinking about the family's future. Jake and Amanda should know what to expect, don't you think?" But I didn't feel like discussing my assets with my daughter-in-law, especially when my body was falling apart, despite following every medical instruction perfectly. The dizziness started a week after Jake's visits became regular. I'd stand up from my desk and the room would tilt violently, my vision swimming with black spots. My heart would race at random moments, sitting at my computer, eating breakfast, lying in bed at night, pounding so hard I could see my chest moving beneath my shirt. The weakness was worst of all, a bone-deep exhaustion that made climbing stairs feel like summiting a mountain. I'd collapse into chairs, my muscles trembling, sweat beading on my forehead from the simple act of walking across a room. "That's concerning," Dr. Patterson said when I called her office, frustrated and frightened. "Those aren't typical side effects of your medication. Are you taking it exactly as prescribed? Same time every day?" I assured her I was, my irritation sharp. I'd built a billion-dollar company through attention to detail. I could manage 2 pills daily. She ordered blood work, adjusted my dosage, told me to monitor my symptoms carefully, but nothing changed. If anything, I felt worse. Amanda noticed something I'd missed during one of her visits. My daughter sat across from me at the kitchen table, her eyes tracking Jake as he excused himself to use the bathroom, the 3rd time in an hour. "Why does he keep going to your bedroom?" she asked quietly after he disappeared down the hallway. "He always finds some reason to go back there. And have you noticed how he asks about your medication constantly? It's obsessive." I'd been too sick to notice the pattern, but Amanda was right. Jake's bathroom trips always took him past my nightstand. His questions about my pills were relentless, and Emily's interest in my will had become aggressive, almost desperate. "He's just worried about me," I said, but the words felt weak even as I spoke them. "Mom, Jake hasn't worried about you in 5 years," Amanda said, her voice dropping lower. "He missed your birthday. He forgot your anniversary dinner. He didn't visit when you had pneumonia last winter. Now suddenly he's here every day asking about your medication? That's not worry, that's something else." Her words planted a seed of doubt that grew roots quickly. That evening, after Jake and Emily left following another invasive visit, I walked to my bedroom with Amanda's suspicions echoing in my mind. My medication sat on the nightstand where I always kept it, white bottle with the blue label positioned with the text facing outward so I could read it easily. I'd developed this habit years ago, a small organizational tic that helped me manage my business and my life. Except the bottle wasn't facing outward anymore. The label pointed toward the wall, the cap slightly loose like someone had opened it and closed it quickly. My hand froze above the bottle, that cold feeling from days ago returning with crushing force. I hadn't moved this bottle since this morning. John was at his book club. Jake and Emily had been here an hour ago. I picked up the bottle with trembling fingers, my heartbeat suddenly loud in my ears, though I couldn't tell if that was my condition or fear. The pills inside looked exactly right, small and white and perfectly ordinary, but the bottle had moved. Someone had touched my medication, and I was getting sicker every single day. I stood there in the dimming evening light, the bottle clutched in my hand, reality shifting beneath my feet like unstable ground. The hidden camera I'd installed to catch a thief sat on my dresser, its tiny lens watching everything. I'd been checking the footage sporadically, fast-forwarding through hours of empty bedroom, finding nothing but John, getting dressed in the mornings and me sleeping at night. But I hadn't checked today's footage yet. I hadn't seen what happened during Jake's latest visit, during his convenient bathroom trip that took him past my nightstand. My hands started shaking as I reached for my laptop, a terrible certainty building in my chest that had nothing to do with my failing heart. Whatever was on that camera, whatever I was about to discover, I knew with sudden, awful clarity that my life was about to change forever. And not because of any heart condition. I sat frozen in front of my laptop, the footage from 3 hours earlier frozen on the screen. Jake stood in my bedroom doorway, checking over his shoulder before stepping inside. The timestamp read 2:47 p.m., right after I'd excused myself to take a phone call in my office. He moved toward my nightstand with purpose, not hesitation, like he'd done this before. His hand reached for my pill bottle without fumbling, without searching. He knew exactly where it was. My finger hovered over the space bar, unable to press play, because once I watched what came next, I couldn't unknow it. Once I saw my son do whatever he was about to do with my medication, our relationship would be over. Every birthday, every holiday, every memory of raising him would be poisoned by this moment. But my body was failing, my symptoms worsening despite perfect compliance with my treatment. I needed to know why. I pressed play. Jake unscrewed the cap from my medication bottle and pulled a different bottle from his jacket pocket. The camera angle captured everything, his steady hands, his calm expression, the methodical way he dumped my prescribed pills into his palm and replaced them with identical-looking tablets from his own supply. He worked quickly, efficiently, like he'd practiced this. Then he positioned the bottle exactly as I'd left it, checked the room once more, and walked out. The entire process took 47 seconds. I replayed it 3 times, hoping I'd misunderstood, hoping there was some innocent explanation. There wasn't. My son had just replaced my heart medication with something else. My son was poisoning me. The sob that tore from my throat surprised me with its violence. I doubled over in my office chair, my hand pressed against my mouth to muffle the sound. Because John was downstairs, and I couldn't tell him yet. Not until I knew more, not until I had irrefutable proof that what I'd just witnessed was real. I called Amanda. "I need you here now," I said when she answered, my voice barely steady. "Don't tell anyone you're coming, just get here." She heard something in my tone that killed her questions. She arrived 20 minutes later, finding me still sitting in my office with the laptop screen dark. "Mom, you're scaring me," Amanda said, kneeling beside my chair. Her hand found mine, and I realized I was shaking. "What's going on?" I showed her the footage, watched her face drain of color as Jake dumped out my pills and replaced them with his own. Watched her press her hand over her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God, Mom, he's—" "I know." My voice came out flat, emotionless, because if I let myself feel what I was feeling, I'd shatter completely. I need more cameras, throughout the house. I need to catch him again, catch him saying something, anything that proves this is intentional. Because right now, a lawyer could argue he was helping me, organizing my medication, being a concerned son. Amanda's jaw tightened, grief transforming into something harder. "I'll handle it. We'll install them tonight while he's not here. Living room, kitchen, hallways, anywhere he might talk freely." She paused, her voice dropping. "Do you think Emily knows?" The question hung between us, heavy with implications. "We're about to find out," I said. We worked through the night, Amanda ordering discrete cameras online with overnight shipping, researching legal recording laws, building a case without saying the words we were building it for. By morning, 5 new cameras were hidden throughout my home, in picture frames behind books, inside decorative objects that had sat on shelves for years. My house became a surveillance network, every conversation potentially recorded, every private moment captured. The cameras went live on a Tuesday morning. Jake and Emily arrived that afternoon, their usual concerned expressions in place. I pretended to feel worse, letting my exhaustion show, playing the role of dying mother while they played devoted son and daughter-in-law. Emily made tea. Jake asked about my medication schedule. They stayed for 90 minutes, their performance flawless. After they left, Amanda and I reviewed the footage from the living room camera. We fast-forwarded through pleasantries and false sympathy, watching ourselves on screen, waiting for the moment we'd stepped out of the room to answer a supposed phone call from my lawyer. The moment Jake and Emily thought they were alone. Jake leaned back on my couch, the tension draining from his shoulders. Emily moved closer, her hand on his thigh. "How much longer?" she asked, her voice low but perfectly captured by the microphone hidden in the lamp beside them. Jake's smile was cold, calculating, nothing like the concerned son he'd been minutes before. "She's getting worse. The dosage I'm giving her now. She won't last a month." He said it casually, like he was discussing a business transaction, not his mother's life. "Then everything changes. The business, the properties, all of it. We'll finally be free of these damn debts." Emily kissed his cheek, her relief visible. "A month," she breathed. "I can wait a month." I stopped the video, sat in my office with Amanda beside me, both of us staring at the frozen image of Jake's satisfied expression. My son had just confirmed he was killing me, had given himself a timeline, had reduced my life to an obstacle standing between him and money. John found us there an hour later, still sitting in silence. "What's wrong?" he asked, alarm sharpening his voice. "Sarah, you look—" "Sit down," I said quietly. "There's something you need to see." I played him everything. The bedroom footage of Jake switching my medication, the living room audio of his confession. I watched my husband's face transform from confusion to horror to devastation as he processed what his stepson had done. John had raised Jake from age 12, had been more of a father than the man who'd abandoned him, had loved him like his own blood. "He's trying to kill you," John said, his voice breaking on the last word. His hands gripped his knees, knuckles white. "That boy I raised, who I taught to ride a bike, who called me dad, he's poisoning you for money." The three of us sat together in my office as evening fell, the laptop screen glowing between us, evidence of betrayal captured in digital clarity. We had proof now. We had his confession. We had everything we needed to stop him. The question was what to do with it, and how to survive the next month while my son waited for me to die. Dr. Rachel Green's office felt different this time. Smaller, more confined, like the walls were pressing in as I sat across from her with my hands folded in my lap to hide their shaking. I'd called that morning, my voice steady despite everything, asking for an emergency appointment. "I need to discuss my medication," I'd said, choosing words carefully. "Something's wrong, and I need comprehensive blood work immediately." Now, sitting in the familiar exam room where she'd diagnosed my heart condition just weeks ago, I struggled to find words for what I needed to say. How do you tell your doctor that someone is poisoning you? How do you explain that your worsening symptoms aren't treatment failure but attempted murder? Dr. Green waited patiently, her pen poised over her notepad, concern etched in the lines around her eyes. "I don't think I'm taking the medication you prescribed," I finally said, each word feeling heavy and surreal. "I think someone has been replacing my pills with something else. I think that's why I'm getting worse instead of better." My voice remained steady, clinical, like I was discussing a business problem rather than my own slow death. Dr. Green's pen stopped moving. She looked up at me, her professional mask slipping for just a moment to reveal shock. "Sarah, that's a very serious allegation. What makes you think—" "I have video evidence of my son switching my medication," I interrupted, pulling out my phone with trembling fingers I could no longer control. I installed cameras in my home. I caught him replacing the pills in my prescription bottle with different ones, and I have audio of him telling his wife I won't last a month. The words hung in the air between us, transforming the appointment from medical consultation to something darker. Dr. Green's face went pale as I played her the footage. Jake's casual efficiency, his cold confession. the timeline he'd given for my death. When the video ended, she sat back in her chair, her professional composure visibly shaken. "We need comprehensive blood work immediately," she said, her voice tight with controlled urgency. "Full toxicology screening. If someone has been giving you the wrong medication, we'll find traces of it in your system." She stood, moving toward the door with purpose. "I'm also calling the lab to mark this as priority. We'll have preliminary results by tomorrow morning." The blood draw took 20 minutes. Vial after vial of dark red filling tubes that would reveal what poison my son had chosen for me. The phlebotomist made small talk I couldn't follow, my mind trapped in the implications of what we were testing for. Each vial represented proof, evidence that would transform family betrayal into attempted murder. By tomorrow, I'd know exactly how Jake had been killing me. Dr. Green called the next morning at 7:15, her voice strained. "Sarah, I need you to come in immediately. Bring the video evidence you showed me yesterday. We need to document everything properly." The gravity in her tone told me she'd found something bad enough to warrant emergency protocols. I sat across from her again an hour later, John beside me this time, his hand gripping mine so tightly it hurt. Dr. Green had papers spread across her desk, lab results, pharmaceutical references, medical journals marked with sticky notes. Her hands weren't quite steady as she turned the documents toward us. "Your blood contains dangerous levels of digoxin," she said, pointing to highlighted numbers that meant nothing to me, but everything to her. "It's a medication used to treat certain heart conditions, but not yours. You were never prescribed digoxin. In the levels present in your system, it's essentially poison." She pulled up a chart on her computer showing me the difference between therapeutic doses and toxic ones. My numbers fell firmly in the toxic range. "Digoxin toxicity causes exactly the symptoms you've been experiencing," Dr. Green continued, her voice taking on the careful precision of someone documenting evidence for court. "Irregular heartbeat, dizziness, extreme fatigue, weakness. Left unchecked, it causes fatal cardiac arrhythmia. Based on the levels in your system and the rate at which they're accumulating, I estimate you had perhaps 3 to 4 weeks before heart failure." The trembling started in my hands and spread through my entire body, violent shaking I couldn't control. 3 to 4 weeks. Jake's timeline had been accurate. He'd known exactly what he was giving me, exactly how long it would take, exactly when I would die. This wasn't impulsive rage or momentary madness. This was calculated murder, planned and executed with medical precision. John's arm came around my shoulders as I doubled over, a sound escaping my throat that was half sob, half retch. My son had been feeding me poison, had watched me deteriorate, had asked about my symptoms with fake concern while tracking his drug's progress toward my death, had sat on my couch and smiled while telling his wife I wouldn't last a month. "I need to document everything," Dr. Green said gently, giving me a moment to collect myself. "This is now a criminal matter. I'm required to report suspected poisoning to the authorities, but I want your permission first given the circumstances." She pulled out fresh forms, her professional mask firmly back in place, though I could see the horror still swimming in her eyes. "I'll prepare a detailed medical report explaining exactly what was done to you, how the digoxin would have killed you, and how close you came to irreversible damage." She typed as she spoke, her fingers flying across the keyboard, building the scientific case that would support what the cameras had captured. "The substitution was sophisticated," she said, almost to herself. "Digoxin pills can look very similar to other heart medications. Someone would need access to the drug, knowledge of dosing, understanding of how it would present as your condition worsening rather than treatment failure. This was planned by someone with medical knowledge or access to someone who has it." I thought of Emily's brother, the pharmacist Jake had mentioned casually months ago, thought of the gambling debts Amanda had hinted at, the financial pressure that could drive desperate measures. The pieces were assembling into a picture more horrifying than I'd imagined. Dr. Green printed her report, the pages emerging from the printer with clinical descriptions of attempted murder. She handed them to me in a folder, her eyes holding mine with an intensity that felt like solidarity. "This document proves that what happened to you wasn't medical error or coincidence. Someone deliberately poisoned you with a drug calculated to cause fatal heart failure. Combined with your video evidence, This is irrefutable proof of attempted murder. I took the folder with hands that had finally stopped shaking, replaced by something colder and harder. Proof, medical evidence, scientific documentation of my son's attempt to kill me. The trembling fear was transforming into something else now, a crystalline clarity born from staring at my own near-death in clinical terms. Jake had given me 3 to 4 weeks to live. But now I knew exactly what he'd done, exactly how he'd planned my death, and exactly how to stop him. The question wasn't whether I'd survive anymore. The question was what I'd do with the time his poison hadn't managed to steal. David Miller didn't react when I played him the video of Jake switching my medication. He sat behind his mahogany desk, fingers steepled beneath his chin, watching the footage with the detached focus of a man who'd spent 30 years reviewing evidence of human cruelty. When Jake's voice came through the speakers, "She won't last a month," David's only response was a slight tightening around his eyes. He'd been my corporate attorney for 15 years, had negotiated billion-dollar deals with that same unshakable composure, but I'd never needed him for something like this. "This is attempted murder," he said flatly when the video ended, his legal mind already categorizing what he'd witnessed. Premeditated, documented with clear motive. Combined with Dr. Green's medical report, this is one of the strongest cases I've seen. He pulled a legal pad toward him, his pen moving in quick, efficient strokes. "But we need to understand the full scope before we involve law enforcement. If Jake went this far, there's more, there's always more." He was right. We discovered exactly how much more when David subpoenaed my financial records, something he could do as my attorney, without alerting Jake that we were investigating. The documents arrived 2 days later, boxes of statements and transaction records that Amanda and I spread across my dining room table like pieces of a puzzle we were terrified to complete. The forged signatures appeared on documents dated over the past 6 months. My name, approximated well enough to fool a casual observer but wrong in subtle ways David's expert eye caught immediately. "See here," he said, pointing to a power of attorney form that supposedly gave Jake access to my business accounts. "The loop on your S is too wide. You sign with a tighter formation, and here," he indicated a real estate transfer document, "the pressure is inconsistent." These were traced probably, using a lightbox or digital overlay. My stomach turned as David laid out document after document bearing my forged signature. Jake had been systematically positioning himself to control my assets, creating paper trails that would survive my death, deeds transferring properties into his name, beneficiary changes on investment accounts, loan applications using my company as collateral. Each forgery was clumsy, amateurish, the work of someone desperate rather than skilled. He was building a framework, David explained, organizing the documents chronologically. Once you died, these would surface. He'd claim you'd made these changes before your death, that you'd been preparing him to take over the business. Without you here to dispute the signatures, they might have held up long enough for him to liquidate assets and disappear. But the forged documents were nothing compared to what we found in my actual bank statements. Unauthorized transfers, small at first, $5,000 here, $3,000 there, amounts I might not notice immediately given the volume of legitimate business transactions. Then larger, $20,000, $50,000, eventually a $100,000 transfer just 2 weeks ago. All moving from my accounts into an LLC I'd never heard of, Johnson Consulting Group. "Who the hell is Johnson?" I asked, my voice sharp with anger that was easier to feel than the grief threatening beneath it. Amanda pulled up her laptop, her fingers flying across the keys with the determination of someone who'd spent the last 3 days becoming an amateur investigator. "Derek Johnson, he's a financial advisor who lost his license 5 years ago for embezzlement." She turned the screen toward us, showing a middle-aged man with a practiced smile and cold eyes. "He runs a consulting business now that's basically a front for helping people hide assets and commit financial fraud." David's jaw tightened. "This isn't just your son anymore. This is organized crime. Jake brought in a professional to help him steal from you while he poisoned you. Johnson would have helped him move the money offshore, create shell companies, make everything untraceable by the time you died." The conspiracy was widening, tentacles reaching beyond family betrayal into something darker and more calculated. My son hadn't acted alone in his desperation. He'd found accomplices, people who made their living helping others destroy their families for profit. "Why, though?" John asked, his voice raw. He'd been sitting silently at the table's edge, watching us uncover layer after layer of Jake's betrayal. Why does he need money so badly that he'd do this? Amanda's expression turned grim. She pulled up another window on her laptop, this one showing credit card statements she'd somehow accessed. I didn't ask how. Because of this. Rows of charges filled the screen. Atlantic City casinos, online poker sites, sports betting platforms. The numbers were staggering. 30,000 lost in a single weekend, 60,000 charged to credit cards already maxed out, payment plans to casinos stretching back 2 years. Jake has a gambling addiction, Amanda said quietly, scrolling through months of devastating losses. And based on these statements from collection agencies, he owes over $400,000 to various creditors. Some of them aren't the legal kind. She pulled up threatening emails, demands for payment, warnings about consequences that went beyond credit scores. The motive crystallized with brutal clarity. Jake wasn't just greedy, he was desperate, drowning in debt to people who wouldn't wait for inheritance timelines or legal processes. He needed money immediately, and my death was his fastest path to it. The poison wasn't about hatred or even greed in the traditional sense. It was about survival. His survival, purchased with my life. 400,000, I repeated, the number feeling obscene. He was willing to murder me for $400,000. He was willing to murder you for his own neck, David corrected grimly. Men don't borrow from loan sharks unless legitimate creditors have already refused them. Jake's not just in debt, he's in danger. And you became his exit strategy. He gathered the forged documents into a neat pile, his legal mind already building the case. But he made mistakes. The forgeries are provable, the transfers are traceable. Derek Johnson has a criminal record, and you have video evidence of the poisoning plus medical proof of the crime. He looked at me across the table, his expression serious. Sarah, we have enough to prosecute. More than enough. Jake, Emily, and Derek Johnson are going to prison for a very long time. But before we take this to the police, you need to understand something. Once we do this, there's no going back. Your son will be arrested, tried, and convicted. Your family will be destroyed in a very public way. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Jake as a little boy, learning to ride a bike with John running behind him. Thought about graduations and birthdays and Christmas mornings. Thought about the son I'd raised versus the man who'd spent the last month feeding me poison while calculating how long I had to live. He stopped being my son the moment he decided I was worth more dead than alive, I said, my voice steady despite the grief trying to choke me. Call the police. Let's finish this. David nodded, reaching for his phone. But Amanda held up her hand, her eyes still locked on her laptop screen. Wait. There's one more thing. She turned the computer toward us, her face pale. Emily's been researching how to contest wills. She has browser history on how to challenge estate documents, how to prove undue influence, how to claim someone was mentally incompetent when they made their will. They were planning for every contingency, David said, understanding dawning. If the forged documents didn't work, they'd challenge your real will. Claim you were mentally unstable due to your heart condition, that Amanda influenced you against Jake, that your estate planning wasn't valid. They were building a multi-layered strategy to steal everything you built, with your death as the centerpiece. I looked around my dining room table at the evidence of my son's conspiracy. Forged documents, stolen money, gambling debts, and careful research into how to rob me even from beyond the grave. This wasn't impulse or momentary madness. This was systematic, planned, executed with help from criminals who specialized in destroying families for profit. Jake had turned my murder into a business plan. Now it was time to turn his business plan into a prison sentence. The bank statements told a story of destruction that took years to write. Amanda spread them across the dining room table in chronological order, creating a timeline of Jake's descent from occasional gambler to desperate addict. The earliest statement, from 3 years ago, showed modest losses. $200 here, $500 there, the kind of recreational betting that could be dismissed as entertainment. But then the amounts grew, metastasizing like cancer through his accounts. Within 6 months, the charges escalated into thousands. Atlantic City Casino, $8,500. Borgata Hotel and Casino, $12,300. Online poker deposits. $15,000 in a single month. Then the cash advances started appearing, desperate infusions of borrowed money chasing losses that never stopped growing. By the end of year 1, Jake had lost over $90,000. Year 2 brought another $150,000 in documented losses. Year 3, the year leading up to my poisoning, showed $200,000 vanished into slot machines, poker tables, and sports betting platforms that never stopped taking his money. $440,000, Amanda said, her voice hollow as she tallied the final number. That's what we can document. But these cash advances suggest he was pulling money from sources that don't show up on bank statements. She pointed to ATM withdrawals in amounts just below the reporting threshold, $9,000 instead of $10,000, repeated weekly at casinos across 3 states. He was trying to hide the full extent of it, but Jake's creditors weren't hiding anything. The text messages Amanda had recovered from his cloud backup, another invasive investigative step I was grateful for, revealed the true horror of his situation. The legitimate collection agencies had given up months ago, their polite payment reminders replaced by threats from people who didn't operate within legal boundaries. I read them with growing nausea, my son's desperation bleeding through every pleading response. A number saved only as V had sent a message 6 weeks before my poisoning. "You're 2 months past deadline. $175,000 due immediately, or we visit your mother's house next. She has a nice place. Shame if something happened to it." Jake's response came an hour later. "I need more time. Big inheritance coming soon. I swear I'm good for it." Another contact, Dimitri, was more direct. "You think you can borrow $80,000 from me and disappear? I know where you work. I know where your wife works. Pay by end of month or we start with her." Jake's reply was frantic. "I'm handling it. My mother is sick, very sick. Few weeks max and I'll have everything. Please just wait." The messages continued, each more threatening than the last. Each met with Jake's promises that money was coming, that his mother's death would solve everything, that he just needed a little more time. He'd turned my murder into a payment schedule, negotiating extensions on his debts by offering my life as collateral. "He told them exactly when you'd die," John said, his voice breaking as he read over my shoulder. "He gave them a timeline based on how much poison he was feeding you." Jesus Christ, Sarah, he was tracking your death like a project deadline. But Jake wasn't suffering alone in his desperation. Emily's text messages, recovered from the same cloud backup, showed she knew everything. More than knew, she'd been actively participating in planning their future funded by my death. A message to her sister from 3 weeks ago read, "Jake says his mom won't make it past Thanksgiving. Finally. Do you know how long I've been waiting to get out of that crappy apartment? We're looking at houses in the $800,000 range. I want at least 4 bedrooms and a pool." Her friend responded, "Is that ethical? She's his mother." Emily's reply came instantly. "She's 64 and sick anyway. We're just speeding up what's inevitable. Besides, she built that company from nothing. Why should she get to keep everything when we're drowning in debt? Jake deserves his inheritance now when it can actually help us." The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. Emily hadn't been manipulated or coerced into this conspiracy. She was an enthusiastic participant, already shopping for houses and planning her lifestyle upgrade while I was being slowly poisoned in my bedroom. Her greed matched Jake's desperation perfectly, creating a partnership built on my planned murder. More messages revealed the depth of their planning. Emily to Jake, "Did you transfer more money yet? I need $5,000 for the wedding deposit." This was for Amanda's cousin's wedding they'd volunteered to help plan, using my stolen money to fund their social obligations while waiting for me to die so they could steal more. Jake to Emily, "Got another $20,000 out today. Derek says we can move $200,000 offshore once she's gone. Keep it away from Amanda and the lawyers. We'll be clear of the loan sharks and still have enough left to buy that house you want." Emily's response, "Perfect." "How much longer?" Jake, 3 weeks, maybe 4. The dose I'm giving her now is high enough that her heart should fail soon. Dr. Rachel won't suspect anything because it'll look like her condition got worse. Natural causes, clean. I set down the phone, my hands trembling with rage rather than fear now. They'd discussed my murder like a business transaction, budgeting my death against their desired lifestyle. Emily wanted a house with a pool. Jake wanted to pay off his gambling debts. Together, they'd decided my life was worth less than their comfort. "There's more," Amanda said quietly, pulling up a spreadsheet on her laptop. "Emily created this. It's a budget based on your estate value." She turned the screen toward me, and I saw my entire life reduced to line items and calculations. Business sale estimate $4.2 million, property holdings $1.8 million, investment accounts $900,000, life insurance $500,000. Emily had listed it all, then subtracted expenses. Jake's gambling debts $440,000, house purchase $850,000, car upgrades $150,000, offshore reserves $200,000, and something labeled celebration fund $50,000. The remaining balance, what they expected to have left after clearing Jake's debts and buying their dream lifestyle, came to approximately $4.7 million. "She allocated $50,000 for celebrating your death," John said, his voice barely above a whisper. They were planning a celebration. The numbers swam before my eyes as the full picture crystallized. My life had a price tag, exactly $440,000 to clear Jake's gambling debts, plus $850,000 for the house Emily wanted, plus enough extra to make them comfortable, while they toasted my death with champagne they'd bought with my money. I wasn't a mother to them anymore. I was a financial asset waiting to be liquidated, an obstacle between them and the lifestyle they felt entitled to. They were going to throw a party, I said, the words tasting like ash. After my funeral, they were going to celebrate. David Miller, who'd been reviewing documents silently in the corner, finally spoke. "Sarah, this spreadsheet is evidence of premeditation. Combined with the text messages, the bank records, and the video footage, we can prove this was a calculated murder plot motivated by financial gain and gambling debts. Every prosecutor's dream case." He paused, his expression grim. "Your son didn't just try to kill you. He turned your murder into a business plan with line items and profit margins." I stared at Emily's spreadsheet, at my life reduced to numbers that would fund their dreams. $440,000 in gambling debts, $850,000 for a house with a pool, $50,000 to celebrate the death of the woman who'd given Jake life. That was my worth to them. That was the price they'd put on 34 years of being Jake's mother. And now, looking at the evidence of their greed and desperation spread across my dining room table, I knew exactly what my revenge would cost them, everything they'd tried to steal, and the freedom they'd taken for granted while planning my murder. The price of killing me was supposed to be $7.4 million in assets. Instead, it would be the rest of their lives behind bars. Detective Marcus Harris sat across from me in David Miller's conference room, his weathered hands folded on the table, his eyes carrying the weight of 23 years investigating human cruelty. He'd reviewed everything, the video footage, medical reports, financial records, text messages, and when he spoke, his voice carried absolute certainty. "Mrs. Mitchell, in 2 decades with the department, I've worked maybe a dozen attempted murder cases. Most fall apart because evidence is circumstantial or motive is unclear. This case is different." He tapped the folder before him. Video documentation of the crime, perpetrator's confession on audio, medical proof of poisoning, financial motive in his own words. "This is the strongest attempted murder case I've ever seen." The words made everything terrifyingly real. My son would be arrested, tried, convicted, our family destroyed beyond repair. David leaned forward, his legal mind already strategizing. "Detective Harris leads the investigation, but we coordinate carefully. Jake and Emily can't know we're building a case. If they suspect anything, they could destroy evidence, flee, or—" he paused delicately, "accelerate their timeline. If Jake knew I'd discovered his plot, he might kill me faster, more directly. The slow poison could become something messier, more desperate." "We need more evidence before we move," Detective Harris said, pulling out a legal pad. "The video and medical records are solid, but I want this case bulletproof. No plea deals, no reduced charges. Can you keep pretending everything is normal while we gather additional evidence?" The thought of smiling at Jake while he fed me poison made my stomach turn. But I nodded. Enduring their presence was better than letting them escape justice. The evidence gathering became surgical. Detective Harris obtained pharmacy records showing Jake had filled a digoxin prescription 3 months ago using a forged doctor's note. Dr. Philip Chen, a cardiologist who'd retired 2 years earlier. The forgery was clumsy, but the pharmacy had filled it without question. Jake walked out with 90 pills, enough to kill me several times over. Amanda, working with a forensic specialist David hired, uncovered Jake's internet search history. 3 months ago, digoxin toxicity symptoms. 2 months ago, how much digoxin is fatal. 6 weeks ago, untraceable poisons that mimic heart attacks. Most damning, can autopsy detect digoxin poisoning? He researched whether we'd prove it after you died, Amanda said, disgust sharp in her voice. He planned for your autopsy. That's premeditation, Mom. First-degree attempted murder. Jake's Amazon purchases added more evidence: pill crusher, empty gel capsules. His forum posts about helping elderly relatives with medication, his browsing history on inheritance law and estate probate. Every search, every purchase built the case stronger. We held strategy sessions in David's conference room, a war room dedicated to destroying my son's freedom. Detective Harris mapped arrests, David prepared legal documents, Amanda compiled evidence, and John sat beside me through every meeting, his hand never leaving mine, the only thing keeping me from shattering. But at night, the weight crushed down. I'd lie in John's arms and weep for the little boy Jake had been, for the son I'd imagined he'd become, for the family we'd never have again. He tried to kill you, John would whisper, holding me as I shook. You're not destroying your family, Sarah. He already did that. The crying would stop, replaced by numbness that felt worse. I'd prosecute my own son, watch him sentenced to decades in prison, and some broken part of me would always wonder if I'd failed him somehow. Stop it, Amanda said one evening, finding me staring at childhood photos of Jake. She knelt beside my chair. Jake made his choices. He gambled away hundreds of thousands. He borrowed from loan sharks. He decided the solution was killing you. Those were his choices, not yours. She pulled out her police statement. I'm standing with you, Mom. I'm testifying against my own brother because what he did is unforgivable. You're not alone in this. I read her statement through tears, this daughter who'd become my ally when my son became my murderer. Her words would help convict him, would add weight to evidence that would bury his defense. Amanda detailed Jake's suspicious behavior with precision, how his concern felt performative, how Emily only asked about assets, how she'd sensed something wrong even before we had proof. Her testimony would be devastating. Detective Harris called 3 days later. We have everything we need. The DA authorized arrest warrants for Jake Mitchell, Emily Mitchell, and Derek Johnson. Attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, and theft. When? My heart pounded. Tomorrow morning. Simultaneous arrests. Mrs. Mitchell, prepare yourself. This will be public. The media will cover it. Your son's arrest for trying to murder his mother. That's a story that will spread. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, the world would know. Tomorrow, no more pretending, no more family dinners with poison hidden in concern. Do it, I said. Arrest them all. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay beside John in darkness, thinking about Jake learning to tie his shoes, graduating high school, looking at me and seeing only dollar signs. By morning, he'd be in handcuffs, and I'd be the mother who put him there. Detective Harris called at 6:30 in the morning. We're moving in 1 hour. Officers are in position at Jake's apartment, Emily's workplace, and Derek Johnson's office. Do you want to be present for Jake's arrest? I'd come this far. Watched the videos, gathered the evidence, built the case. I needed to see it through. John drove me to Jake's apartment building, neither of us speaking during the 20-minute ride. 3 unmarked police cars sat parked on the street, officers waiting for the signal. My hands trembled in my lap as we pulled up behind them. In minutes, my son would be arrested for attempting to murder me. In minutes, everything would become irreversibly public. Detective Harris approached our car. We go in at 7. The warrant covers everything. Computers, phones, financial documents, medication bottles. Jake and Emily are both inside. We'll separate them immediately. He paused. Mrs. Mitchell, this will be difficult to watch. Are you certain you want to be here?" "I'm certain," I said, because Jake needed to see me, needed to understand that I knew everything, that his careful plot had been discovered, that the mother he'd tried to kill was the reason he'd be spending decades in prison. At 7 o'clock exactly, Detective Harris gave the signal. Officers moved toward the building with practiced efficiency. John and I followed, climbing to the 3rd floor where Jake and Emily rented their modest apartment, the apartment they'd planned to abandon, for an $800,000 house purchased with my stolen money. Detective Harris knocked firmly. "Police, we have a warrant. Open the door." Confused voices came from inside, footsteps approaching. Then Jake opened the door, hair messy from sleep, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt. His expression shifted from confusion to alarm as he registered the 6 officers crowding his doorway. "Jake Mitchell, you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and theft," Detective Harris said. 2 officers moved past Jake into the apartment. Jake's face drained of color, his mouth opening without sound. Then he saw me standing behind the officers, and something in his expression shattered. "Mom?" His voice came out broken, confused. "What's happening?" Detective Harris pulled out his phone, showing the video of Jake entering my bedroom, switching my medication with calm efficiency. Jake's face went from pale to gray, his legs seeming to weaken. I can't explain," he stammered, but Detective Harris was already turning him around, snapping handcuffs around his wrists. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The Miranda rights continued while my son stood trembling, his eyes locked on mine with something between disbelief and desperation. Emily's arrest was happening simultaneously in the living room, her voice rising in sharp panic. "This is insane! I didn't do anything! This is all Jake! I told him not to—" Her loyalty evaporated the instant handcuffs appeared. "He's the one who poisoned her. He bought the pills. I just knew about it." Her survival instinct overrode any pretense of partnership, her words tumbling out in frantic self-preservation as they led her toward the door. Jake finally found his voice as officers began searching the apartment. "Mom, please. I'm sorry. I was desperate. The debts, the people I owed money, they were going to kill me. I didn't know what else to do." His words came out pathetic and hollow. "I wasn't really going to let you die. I was going to stop before it got too bad." I stepped closer to him, close enough to see tears forming in his eyes. "You told Emily I wouldn't last a month," I said quietly. "You researched how long digoxin stays in the bloodstream after death. You created a budget for celebrating after my funeral. You allocated $50,000 for a party. Each fact landed like a physical blow. You weren't buying time, Jake. You were buying a house with a pool using money you'd get from killing me." Detective Harris held up an evidence bag containing a pill bottle. "We found your digoxin supply, Mr. Mitchell. Hidden in your closet. Still has 23 pills left. You used 67 pills to poison your mother over 6 weeks." He showed Jake's search history. "You researched untraceable poisons. You calculated dosages. This wasn't desperation. This was premeditated murder." Jake's legs gave out. An officer caught him as sobs racked his body. "I'm sorry," he kept repeating. "Mom, please don't do this, please." But I'd already done it. The evidence was gathered, the arrests made, the case built. Jake's apologies couldn't undo the poison, couldn't erase the weeks I'd spent dying while he calculated my timeline. "Officers, take him," Detective Harris said. They led Jake toward the door, hands cuffed behind his back, face wet with tears that came too late. As he passed me, he tried to stop, tried to say something more, but I turned away. John's arm came around my shoulders as we watched them load Jake into the police car, Emily already secured in another vehicle. The neighbors were emerging, phones out to record the spectacle. By afternoon, the news would spread. By evening, everyone would know. As we drove away, I looked back once to see officers carrying evidence boxes from his apartment. Every box contained proof of his guilt, documentation of his betrayal. I'd installed that camera expecting to catch my husband stealing $2,000. Instead, I'd caught my son stealing my life. Jake had given me a timeline of 1 month to live. Now I'd given him a timeline too, decades behind bars, thinking about the mother he'd tried to kill and the inheritance he'd never receive. The courtroom felt too small for the weight of what was happening inside it. I sat in the witness box 6 months after Jake's arrest, my right hand raised, swearing to tell the truth about how my son had tried to kill me. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Catherine Reynolds, approached with a tablet in her hands. "Mrs. Mitchell, can you identify the person in this video?" She pressed play, and there was Jake on the screen, entering my bedroom, switching my medication with practiced efficiency. "That's my son, Jake Mitchell," I said, my voice steady despite the way my heart was fracturing with each word. Across the courtroom, Jake sat at the defense table in an ill-fitting suit, his eyes downcast, refusing to look at me. Emily sat at a separate table with her own attorney, her earlier attempts to blame everything on Jake having earned her a separate trial. "And what is he doing in this video?" Catherine asked, though everyone in the courtroom already knew the answer. "He's replacing my prescribed heart medication with digoxin, a drug that was slowly killing me." The words tasted like ash, but I spoke them clearly, projecting so the jury could hear every syllable. For 2 hours I testified about the hidden cameras, the worsening symptoms, the discovery of his plot. Jake's attorney tried to break me on cross-examination, suggesting I'd misunderstood his intentions, that perhaps he'd been trying to help organize my medications. But the video evidence made his questions sound desperate and hollow. Dr. Rachel Green took the stand the next day, transforming my near-death into scientific fact. She explained digoxin toxicity to the jury with charts and graphs, showing how the levels in my bloodstream had climbed toward fatal concentrations. Based on the rate of accumulation and the dosage Mrs. Mitchell was receiving, she had approximately 3 to 4 weeks before the digoxin would have caused fatal cardiac arrhythmia. Dr. Green testified, her professional composure unable to hide the horror in her eyes. This wasn't an accident or a mistake. Someone with knowledge of pharmacology deliberately poisoned her with a drug calculated to cause heart failure that would appear natural. The defense attorney tried to suggest alternative explanations, pharmacy errors, accidental contamination, but Dr. Green demolished each theory with medical precision. The digoxin in Mrs. Mitchell's system matched the pills found hidden in her son's closet. The dosage was consistent with deliberate, repeated administration over weeks. There is no innocent explanation for these facts. The prosecution's case became overwhelming when Derek Johnson took the stand. The corrupt financial advisor had accepted a plea deal, trading testimony against Jake for a reduced sentence. He sat in the witness box wearing prison orange, his practiced smile gone, replaced by the hollow expression of a man trying to save himself. "Jake Mitchell came to me 18 months ago," Derek testified, his voice flat and factual. He owed over $400,000 to various creditors, including some dangerous people. He asked me to help him access his mother's assets before she died. When I said that wasn't possible while she was alive, he asked me how long it would take to settle an estate after a death. That's when I knew what he was planning. Jake's attorney objected repeatedly, but Derek's testimony was devastating. He described helping Jake set up shell companies, prepare forged documents, and plan the transfer of my assets after my anticipated death. He told me his mother wouldn't last long. He had it all timed out. He knew exactly when she'd die because he was controlling the dosage. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood and delivered the verdict in a clear, firm voice, guilty on all counts. Attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, theft. Jake's head dropped into his hands, his shoulders shaking with sobs that the jury watched with unmoved expressions. They'd seen the videos. They'd heard the evidence. They understood exactly what he'd done. Judge Patricia Morrison's face was carved from stone as she prepared to deliver sentencing 2 weeks later. "Mr. Mitchell, in 30 years on the bench, I have never seen a betrayal as calculated and cruel as yours," she said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute moral authority. "You poisoned your own mother for money. You researched her death like a science project. You gave yourself a timeline for her murder. You celebrated your upcoming inheritance while she was dying." She paused, letting the words settle over the courtroom. "The law allows me discretion in sentencing. I will use none of it. You are sentenced to 25 years in state prison for attempted murder, to run consecutively with 10 years for conspiracy and 5 years for fraud. You will serve 40 years before being eligible for parole." Jake's sob was audible throughout the courtroom. 40 years. He was 34. He'd be 74 before he could even apply for parole, older than I was now, his entire life consumed by the consequences of trying to take mine. Emily's sentencing came a month later after her separate trial reached the same inevitable conclusion. Judge Morrison showed no more mercy to her than she had to Jake. "Mrs. Mitchell, you were an enthusiastic participant in this plot. You budgeted your mother-in-law's death. You researched how to steal her assets. You allocated funds for celebrating her murder. You are sentenced to 20 years in state prison." I sat in the gallery for both sentencings, John beside me, Amanda on my other side. We watched them led away in chains, their lives effectively over, their freedoms sacrificed for debts and desires that seemed absurdly small now. 40 years and 20 years. 6 decades of combined imprisonment for a plot that had failed because I'd noticed a pill bottle sitting at the wrong angle. As we left the courthouse, reporters shouted questions I didn't answer. The case had become national news. The son who poisoned his mother, caught on hidden cameras, convicted on overwhelming evidence. But I felt no triumph walking down those courthouse steps, just a hollow exhaustion and the knowledge that justice, however necessary, couldn't restore what had been destroyed. My son would grow old in prison, and I would grow old knowing I'd put him there, living with that truth for whatever years remained. The for sale sign went up outside Mitchell Development 3 months after Jake's sentencing. I stood across the street with John, watching workers install it, feeling something between relief and grief. I'd built that company from nothing, 30 years of calculated risks and brutal negotiations. My name on that building had meant something in this city, but Jake had tried to steal it through murder, had reduced my life's work to line items in a budget that included $50,000 for celebrating my death. I couldn't look at the building the same way anymore. Every success felt tainted by what Jake had been willing to do to possess it. So I sold it, the entire company, to a development firm that had been courting me for years. The sale netted me more than I'd ever need, but the money felt hollow. I built Mitchell Development to prove I could, but watching my son get sentenced to 40 years taught me that empires mean nothing when the people you built them for would rather see you dead. The estate restructuring happened in David Miller's office with the same surgical precision we'd used to build the criminal case. Amanda became the sole beneficiary of everything: the business proceeds, the investment accounts, the properties. John was protected with trusts that would keep him comfortable for life. But Jake's name was erased from every document, every provision, every mention of inheritance. Legally and financially, I no longer had a son. "Are you certain about this?" David asked as I signed the final documents. "It's irrevocable." "I won't change my mind," I said, my pen moving steadily. Jake had written me out of his future when he started poisoning me. This was simply me returning the favor. He'd get nothing from me, not money, not property, not forgiveness, just 40 years to think about what he'd destroyed. But selling the business didn't heal the wound Jake had carved into our family. That healing happened slowly, in the small moments John and I shared in the aftermath. We'd been married 20 years, a solid partnership built on mutual respect, but trauma reveals what relationships are truly made of. Some couples shatter under that pressure. We didn't. John held me through the nightmares that started after the trial, dreams where I took Jake's pills and felt my heart stop. He sat with me during panic attacks that hit without warning, his hand steady on my back. He never told me to move on or get over it. He just stayed, proving through action what Jake had destroyed through betrayal. Amanda visited more frequently, our relationship deepening through shared trauma. She'd lost her brother, but she'd gained clarity about what family actually means. It's not shared blood or legal obligations. It's who stands beside you when everything falls apart, who chooses loyalty over convenience, who loves you not for what you can give them but for who you are. "I'm proud of you, Mom," Amanda said during one visit over coffee. "The way you handled it, gathering evidence, building the case, testifying against Jake even though it destroyed you, that took courage I'm not sure I'd have." "You already showed it," I assured her. "You stood with me when your brother became my enemy. You testified against him. That's the kind of courage that matters." The philosophical shift came gradually, in quiet moments when I wasn't actively fighting or grieving. I'd spent 30 years building an empire, measuring my worth in properties developed and deals closed. But none of that had protected me from my son's betrayal. My empire had actually made me a target, transforming me from mother into asset to be liquidated. What saved me wasn't my business acumen or fortune. It was noticing a pill bottle at the wrong angle. It was the loyalty of a daughter who trusted her instincts. It was a husband who stood beside me through the worst thing imaginable. True wealth isn't measured in property holdings or investment accounts. It's measured in who remains when everything else falls away, in relationships that don't require payment, in people who would never calculate your worth by what they'd inherit after your death. I built an empire, and it meant nothing when my son decided I was worth more dead than alive. But John stayed. Amanda stayed. And in the end, that's the only wealth that actually matters. I'm 65 now. My heart condition managed with correct medication, my life stretching ahead in ways Jake tried to prevent. I sold the empire, I restructured my estate, I watched Jake grow old in prison through occasional reports, his parole hearings decades away. And I've made peace with it. Not forgiveness, I'll never forgive what he did, but acceptance that some betrayals are too complete for reconciliation. Here's what I want you to understand. Family betrayal can happen to anyone. Hidden cameras and medical tests saved my life, but awareness made them possible. I noticed small signs, moved pill bottles, invasive questions, worsening symptoms that didn't make sense. I trusted my instincts even when they seemed paranoid. If you've found value in my story, if it's made you more aware of manipulation and betrayal, please subscribe to this channel. Share this story with others who might need to hear it. Most people who are being poisoned, literally or figuratively, by their families, never see it coming. I saw it coming. I survived. And now I'm using that survival to warn others. Pay attention to the details. Trust your instincts. Install the cameras. Ask the questions. The life you save might be your own. Subscribe now for more stories of betrayal, survival, and justice. Hit that notification bell. Remember, true wealth isn't what you build, it's who stays loyal when everything